Hello, and congratulations in starting your experience at SDSU. My name is Jessica Chang. I'm the Diversity Officer for Student Engagement, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. Today, I'm going to talk to you about an introduction to inclusion, more specifically, implicit bias, as we welcome you to SDSU. And so, as you start your journey with us at SDSU, we want to strive for a welcoming environment for our diverse community. I'm going to expand specifically on our SDSU value of equity and inclusion in everything that we do. We are excited to have such a diverse community of individuals, identities, and cultures at SDSU, and we would like to share what creates a respectful, growing mindset to prepare you to interact and get the most out of the wealth of our community. I also wanted to note that this presentation is about 60 minutes long, so feel free to view this in segments. And so to create a shared foundation for all of us, I want to encourage you to think about these three concepts as you start your journey of self-awareness, curiosity, and education. So for example, diversity is having a seat at the table through potentially seeing a club or student organization that relates to a heritage, background, social identity, such as ethnicity, gender, or religion, to list some examples. Inclusion is being able to observe this social identity or cultural background that you're interested in represented at SDSU in ways such as through artwork around campus. Belonging is having that voice be heard and being able to take your engagement to the next level through action such as creating policy or programs on campus. These three concepts set the foundation for inclusion and being able to relate with similar or different-minded individuals as you express yourself. And today, through the concept of implicit bias, we're going to explore how you could take the first move in your journey. So not only exploring diversity and inclusion, but moving into the ability to hold space for people you might not understand initially. My personal self-transformation as I started college was being pushed outside of my comfort zone and learning and expanding my pool of experiences. And I hope today's tools will help you adjust to college with an open-hearted, open-minded curiosity for you to foster belonging. And so what is implicit bias? Implicit bias highlights the fact that we all have biases that affect how we interact with other people. The implicit part here refers to the fact that when we are not aware of our biases, they can impact our actions in an unintentional and involuntary way. Everyone has bias. Acknowledge your own biases is the first step towards self-awareness and understanding your reactions to another individual. And Project Implicit is a website where you can do activities that can help reveal those implicit biases. Even if you're the most self-aware person in the world, doing some of these activities is likely to be eye-opening. I'll elaborate more on this later. So where does forming implicit bias come from? As social beings that learn from each other, you almost certainly have biases, whether you're aware of them or not. So part of the beauty of higher education is the opportunity to unlearn some of the things we might have learned in childhood and relearn with a wealth of knowledge. As children, we pick up on nonverbal cues around us, which influences our development of implicit associations and creating our biases as social beings that learn from each other. You almost certainly have biases. And some examples on this graphic exemplify where you could get some of those biases. It could be through observations of social roles within your family and friends. Perhaps seeing something that's favored or unfavored can turn into a bias or recognition that something is supposedly good or bad. The media has influenced different pieces of knowledge that we see as the main culture or the dominant culture represented, and ultimately creates familiarity bias. And nonverbal behaviors of others can also be viewed as seeing someone with a discomforted reaction, and you might internalize and think that's good or bad as well. So forming implicit bias is through time. And so next, I'd like to show this video that frames implicit bias in a different way as well.
Implicit bias.
Implicit bias.
Implicit bias.
2016 was the year that implicit bias went somewhat mainstream.
Yeah, so when Hillary Clinton mentioned implicit bias in the debates, our phones started blowing up, all our friends started emailing us about it.
But what is implicit bias? Implicit biases are basically thought processes that happen without you even knowing it. Little mental shortcuts that hold judgments you might not agree with. And sometimes those shortcuts are based on race. First, some clarity. Saying someone has an implicit bias is different from calling someone a racist.
The word racist is a highly loaded term, right, here in American society. A lot of times when people are using it, they're thinking of the kind of old-fashioned Ku Klux Klan style racist.
But implicit bias isn't anywhere near that, explicit.
Implicit bias is something that comes out of ordinary mental functioning, out of how the mind normally works.
We've all grown up in a culture with media images, news images, conversations we heard at home, our education. Think of that as a fog we've been breathing our whole life. We've never even realized it, what we were taking in.
And that fog causes associations that lead to biases.
I somehow know that if you say peanut butter, I'm going to say jelly. That's an association that's been ingrained in me because throughout my life, peanut butter and jelly are together. And in many forms of media, there's an overrepresentation of Black men and violent crime being paired together.
And because of that, I actually deep down inside have been taught that Black men are violent and aggressive and not to be trusted, that they're criminals, that they're thugs.
With all those associations, I'm not trying to let us off the hook, but in some ways, none of us stood a chance.
Starting today, we'll post a video a day dealing with one challenge of understanding implicit bias and its relationship to race and exploring ways we might combat the problem.
One more thing, if you're seeing this and thinking that it doesn't apply to you, well, you might be falling prey to the blind spot bias. That's a scientific name for a mental bias that allows you to see biases in others, but not in yourself. We're biased.
So to further expand on implicit bias, I'd like to introduce this slide on System 1 and System 2 thinking. The behavioral economist and Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman talks about cognitive bias as System 1 thinking, which is largely unconscious and automatic. System 1 thinking is likely to drive our ingrained behavior, second nature from a young age, especially reactive conditions, and ambiguous or incomplete information. So when we have time constraints, when we are stressed, when we have a lack of sleep, this is when cognitive control is compromised. And this speaks to our primitive mind, which makes mental shortcuts, and this could be driven by fear. Our System 2 is our awareness mind, which takes much more effort through pausing, assessing, and checking our implicit assumptions, even checking if we're really in danger and what is igniting our primitive mind. It is a conscious decision that requires time, and it is like building a push-up or exercise for our brains. This is what brings me to our next slide. Understanding bias is a first step to working with a variety of people and an important step in your journey into SDSU. You'll have opportunities to practice self-awareness and revisit the information you have from time and time again and expanding your worldview. Once again, we all experience our own biases, and if you have initial guilt or shame processing through this, we encourage this is a natural process for everybody. And one tangible way to move past that is onto the next step of getting engaged and connecting with other perspectives. You'll have the opportunity to build and exercise these skills, to humanize your fears, and tap into your creative intellectual capacities to be able to hold multiple perspectives through courage, growing gains, and deeper self-discovery. The previous slide is one way to go through the steps of inclusion before actually inciting a harmful judgment to someone. Part of your self-discovery at SDSU is learning how to build relationships through trust and awareness. We also want to name that it is possible for us to treat others unfairly, even when we believe it is wrong to do so. Cognitive neuroscience research has taught us that most decisions we make, especially regarding people, are alarmingly contaminated by our biases. Our assessments of others are never as objective as we believe them to be. So checking our implicit biases means seeing what assumptions or stereotypes we are making about others, and instead asking open-ended questions thoughtful questions to get to know someone, the reasoning behind their actions, or their background. We want to say that inclusion is a continuous, ongoing journey that requires reflection, vigilance, empathy, and care. In our SDSU values of equity and inclusion, we want to share the learning of investigating social norms as you understand it from the communities you've been a part of, and then start thinking about how to expand your worldview and how to interact with others in a non-judgmental way. This is an example of a social norm one may have and how it can turn into inequity through unawareness. And so the social cultural norm that we may be familiar with is having ability-centric environments or ableism. The implicit bias here is not thinking through universal design or disability inclusion. So for example, understanding where wheelchair ramps are or American Sign Language offerings. And this leads to a disadvantage or microaggression for people with varying abilities and not having offerings for them, having access or accommodations for them. And this results in a resulting inequity that can be repeated into the social norm all over again, similarly to what the video and the examples had shown us in the implicit bias video you previously had seen. And you can see the arrow bringing it around, right? And recreating that social norm and perpetuating it, which is the resulting inequity of people with varying abilities are constantly excluded in events, environments, and social life, rendered invisible. This is an example of how your experience at SDSU can promote your growth as you start your own leadership experience and search for knowledge and creating inclusive spaces. So now it's time to take action. Looking back at the implicit bias exercise, Project Implicit test, we want you to take a test for yourself and save these results as you'll further discuss this with your SDSU ambassador group in June and July. And it's an opportunity to take time about what has formed your biases about others and getting to know yourself more in preparation to join our diverse SDSU community. And then also, if you're interested immediately to further your understanding and your involvement, the Center for Inclusive Excellence has an Identity and Allyship Awareness Certificate program as well. And so, as we can see in this graphic on the right, right now, the iceberg, the tip is what we can see, and it represents like surface culture. So things that we could see versus in food, holidays, or language. And what we want to encourage you to get to know a little bit more is the below the surface, deeper culture, such as a variety of different communication styles and backgrounds. Also, in your next steps, please follow the cultural centers and the Center for Inclusive Excellence on social media to learn more and for more tools. You can attend an allyship seminar. Here's a website for all 9 of our cultural centers to find their social media on. We have the Asian Pacific Islander Desi American Center, the Black Resource Center, the Center for Intercultural Relations, the Latinx Resource Center, the Native Resource Center, Project Repound, Center for Transformative Justice for Previously Incarcerated Students, the Pride Center, the Undocumented Resource Center, and the Women's Resource Center, as you can see in this graphic. And they're also going to have their own sections in the student life modules that are coming up. So I encourage you to keep your eye open for them too and learn more about them. And so here is what the front page of implicit bias test looks like. And I wanted to walk you through a little bit more to give you an idea. You're going to have images flashed in front of you, and you're going to associate them as good or bad based on the different identities. And it will let you understand self-reports of your preferences. And there's a variety of different topics that you can choose from. So I would encourage you to pick one that you're unfamiliar with or that you like to learn a little bit more about. And so they have a variety of different topics such as sexuality, race, religion, gender, career. And again, please save your results and you'll have an opportunity to continue this conversation with your SDSU ambassador leaders in July. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. And so I really appreciate your time and energy you've given in this intentional, community-oriented connection today. I hope this contributes to the lifelong learning you will start at SDSU. Please email me if you have any questions. And our email is cie.social@sdsu.edu. And again, welcome to our SDSU community. Thank you for your time today, and I hope it was helpful.